When Eleanor walked into Monarch Auto Gallery, no one there had the slightest clue who she really was. All they saw was a woman in faded jeans, a plain white t-shirt, no makeup, no designer heels, and just like that, they made up their minds. "I'm sorry, but the cars here start at $300,000, the manager said, his voice polite but his eyes cautious, not because he cared about her, but because he feared she might ruin the showroom's image. She didn't respond. No argument, no explanation. She simply smiled, a fragile curve of the lips, so faint even she wasn't sure it was real, and turned to walk out of the glass doors. As the doors closed quietly behind her, she stood still for a moment in the morning light, her hand clenched tightly around the phone in her pocket. She didn't cry, but something shifted inside her, not because she felt insulted, but because she knew. If it wasn't her today, it would be someone else tomorrow, someone without the power to speak up, someone without the truth to prove they were worthy. "They didn't see me," she thought. "They only saw the clothes I wore." And with that, she walked away. But what the people inside that dealership didn't know was that she'd be back, not for revenge, but to teach them something no Ivy League school ever could, a lesson in respect, in human worth, and in the cost of judging someone by appearances alone. 24 hours later, a midnight blue Rolls Royce Phantom glided to a silent stop at the front entrance of Monarch Auto. Every head inside the showroom turned. The manager held his breath. Then the rear door opened. This story began with a simple white t-shirt, but the lesson it would leave behind would shake an entire system. When Eleanor first walked into Monarch Auto Gallery, she wasn't trying to make a statement. She simply wanted to find a gift, something truly meaningful for her sister. Cassandra, the woman who had always stood by Eleanor through the toughest years, the same Cassandra who had just completed chemotherapy after her battle with breast cancer, and who once shared a quiet dream to one day drive a deep blue coupe along the coastline, windows down, wind in her hair. Elena remembered her sister's eyes so vividly when she spoke of that dream. It wasn't longing. It was a flicker of life, a fragile spark of hope, burning quietly in the darkness of pain so deep, the future itself felt erased. And in that moment, Elena made a promise to herself she would make that dream real. She chose the Azure Phoenix Coupe, a limited edition masterpiece. Only 20 exist in the world. At Monarch Auto Gallery, the most prestigious luxury dealership in the Pacific Northwest. They had one, just one, displayed right in the center of the showroom like a monument reserved only for the deserving. Eleanor could have easily sent an assistant. She could have called ahead, booked a private appointment, been escorted like royalty. But she didn't. She wanted to be there, herself, to see the car with her own eyes, to place her hands on the wheel, to feel every detail. Because this wasn't just a purchase. It was gratitude. It was resurrection. It was love. But instead of hearing, "How may I help you today?" the first words that greeted her were, "We don't carry anything under $100,000. You might want to try the dealership across the street." And in that moment, a part of Elena wanted to explain. To tell them her name had once graced Forbes's 40 Under 40. To talk about the rehabilitation centers she helped build, and the children who whispered her name every time they took their first steps again. But she didn't. She just stood there, eyes locked with the manager's self-satisfied grin. And that's when she understood today wasn't about proving her worth. It was about exposing a mindset embedded deep within the system, that a person's value could be measured by the logo on their shoes or the way they wore their hair. And when she turned to leave, silent, composed, She already knew a plan had begun. Monarch Auto Gallery in the morning was like a flawless stage play. The floors gleamed like mirrors. Luxury cars stood in rows like sculptures. Employees moved with choreographed precision as if they'd stepped out of a Swiss watch commercial. But beneath that pristine surface hung a thin, invisible air, heavy with silent judgment, weighted with gazes that instantly measured who was someone and who was no one. When Elena walked in, she immediately sensed the subtle shift in the air. A sudden hush, a quick glance from the front desk, a shared look between two employees, followed by a faint, dismissive smirk. She knew that reaction all too well, but today she hadn't come to be welcomed. She came to observe, to see what surfaces when someone who doesn't look upper class walks into a place designed only for those who belong. A young staff member, clearly new to the job, Liam Voss, approached her, slightly hesitant but polite. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Liam. How can I assist you today?" Elena offered a soft smile and nodded. "I'm here to see the Azure Phoenix in midnight blue. I heard this is one of the only two places that still have it." Before Liam could reply, another voice cut in sharply. "I'll handle this. Liam, thank you." Jason Connors stepped out from the glass office, polished shoes, sharp suit, and eyes like scanners. He didn't need to ask a single question. With just one glance, he had made up his mind. Faded jeans, unbranded white t-shirt, no logo sneakers. Verdict, not worth his time. "Good morning," Jason said with a thin smile, the kind that never reaches the eyes. "Looking for the exit. The used car lot is across town." Elena straightened her posture, her gaze calm, unwavering. "I'm here for the Azure Phoenix," she said quietly. "I'd like to see the interior and color options." Jason paused just long enough to let the disbelief drip from his expression. Then, in a tone slow and deliberate, like he was explaining long division to a child, he replied, "That vehicle is a limited edition. We only serve clients who have made appointments and submitted verified financial records. It's company policy." Each word was measured, not to inform, but to remind her luxury cars aren't for people like you. Liam, still standing nearby, opened his mouth perhaps to step in, but Jason shut him down instantly. "Liam, please grab some Genesis brochures," he said without looking at Elena, "or escort her to the lounge. Let's not have her wandering around." Eleanor felt her chest tighten, not from anger, but from something far more familiar: recognition. She'd been here before, as the little girl asked to leave the mall because her jacket was torn, as the college student overlooked by sales clerks in favor of more promising customers, as the woman waiting in line to submit a grant proposal only to be asked, again and again, "Are you sure you're the representative? Now?" She looked at Jason, and in him, she saw the same pattern, replicated, polished, systemic. And then she spoke, her voice calm, but deliberate. "I can pay today," she said, "in full, cash or wire, your choice." Jason laughed, a dry, echoing laugh that rang across the marble-floored showroom like the punchline to a cruel joke. "Cash," Jason scoffed. "Do you have any idea this car costs more than a small mansion? This is Monarch Auto. Ma'am, not a roadside used car lot." Eleanor didn't flinch. She simply replied, her tone even, "I believe my money holds the same value as anyone else's here." Jason stepped in closer. His voice dropped lower now, but sharp as a blade. "Let me be clear. You're wasting my time. If you want a serious conversation, come back dressed appropriately and bring financial documentation. Otherwise," he flicked his hand, dismissively, like swatting away a fly. The entire showroom fell into silence. Dozens of eyes watched, some confused, some curious, and some with a cruel satisfaction watched like spectators at a public humiliation. Eleanor glanced around. No one said a word. Not one person, manager, employee, or guest stepped forward. No one objected, except one, Liam, the young salesman. He stepped closer, his hands trembling slightly, but his voice steady enough to matter. "Jason," Liam said quietly, but firmly. "She asked about the right car, and I think she deserves to hear the details. Maybe we shouldn't just assume." Jason shot him a glare, but Liam didn't back down. Eleanor gently touched Liam's arm, a silent "thank you," then turned to go. "Thank you," she said softly. "I've seen enough." She walked toward the door, but paused for just a moment, and in that stillness, she heard it clear as day. From behind her, "Some people really don't know their place." What they didn't know was that in just a few hours, when the midnight blue Phantom pulled up outside the showroom, every place would be rearranged. When Elena opened the glass door that led to the garden behind their home, the sun was already high. The wind off Lake Maple rustled the row of maple trees, sending early autumn leaves tumbling across the stone steps. Her steps were slow, but steady. Not wandering, just deliberate. On the balcony, Gabriel sat with his laptop open, though his eyes had drifted from the screen the moment he heard her car pull up. He'd grown used to the quiet rhythm of her return, the soft click of the gate, the careful footsteps she took not to disturb anyone. But today, something was different. He looked at her with the kind of knowing that only comes from living beside the same soul for long enough to recognize the quiet storm hiding behind calm eyes. "What happened, Lena?" His voice was low, gentle, the way he always spoke when she needed to be heard, not advised. Eleanor sank into the chair across from him. She slowly loosened her ponytail, a small gesture she only made when she was truly tired. The wind caught a few strands of her hair, blowing them across her face. And in that quiet moment, she thought about all the times she'd been judged and still had chosen to rise above it, to forgive. "I just got kicked out of a car showroom," she said finally, not with words, but with glances, with smirks, with a sentence, "Some people don't know their place." Gabriel's brow furrowed, but he didn't interrupt. He knew this wasn't a story she needed solved. It was one that needed to be seen. Eleanor recounted everything. How Jason entered the conversation like a walking verdict. How his laughter, loud, deliberate, felt like punctuation on a public humiliation. She spoke of Liam, the one young staffer who had the courage to speak. And finally, she described the moment she walked away, no shouting, no declarations, no dramatic reveal that she could buy the entire dealership if she wanted to. She was quiet for a while. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "I'm not angry. I'm hurt. Not for me, but for everyone else who'll never get the chance to come back and be seen differently." Gabriel straightened in his seat, his eyes now darker, more focused. "So, what do you want to do?" Elena shook her head, smiling a tired kind of smile. Not weak, just worn. "Part of me wants to let it go. Not because I'm fragile, but because I'm tired of proving myself." She paused, her voice steadied. "But another part of me wants them to understand, not because I need justice for myself, but because I've lived long enough to know if we don't say something, there'll be another girl turned away one day because of her genes." Gabriel said nothing for a moment. He knew these battles well, the ones his wife chose, not out of pride, but because she believed silence was just another form of complicity, not revenge, just understanding. he repeated, then added, "I think we can do that." Elena looked at him, her eyes full of quiet gratitude. Few people truly knew this. Behind her strength stood a man who always stepped one pace behind, not to place her in the spotlight, but to better see where she was headed. Gabriel rose from his chair and walked into his study. He made a few calls. No drama, no press, no threats of legal action, no flexing of power. Just a plan, simple, intentional, meant to serve as a living lesson for those who had forgotten that respect is not something you grant based on someone's income statement. As Eleanor turned to leave the room, Gabriel called out softly behind her, "Tomorrow, do you want to come with me?" Elena shook her head gently. "No, this isn't personal, and I don't need to be there when they realize their mistake. I just need to know that someone showed them what they refused to see." She paused for a breath, then smiled this time, a real smile that lit up her face. "But I will expect a full report." Gabriel laughed, warm and low. He stepped forward, wrapping an arm gently around her shoulders. "With photo documentation," he said, annotated. That evening, their home was quieter than usual. But inside, something was stirring, a plan beginning to take shape. Not to reverse the power dynamic, but to restore what had been quietly stolen by a society that measured human worth by brand labels and outward polished dignity, kindness, and the ability to see beyond appearances. The next morning at Monarch Auto Gallery began like any other. The lights flicked on at 8 a.m. sharp. Staff rotated between brewing coffee, polishing hoods, and adjusting their collars in the mirror. Jason Connors arrived on schedule, impeccably dressed. White shirt crisp, cobalt blue tie perfectly knotted. His gait timed like the rhythm of a personal success anthem. Jason was still basking in the glow of yesterday's performance. A dreamy girl, as he called her, had walked in, and he had professionally, surgically, shut her down. The night before, he had recounted the whole thing at a cocktail party with a few industry friends, ending the story with a line that had everyone laughing. She thought she could buy a $300,000 car, wearing sneakers and a white t-shirt. Jason called it high-efficiency salesmanship, pre-qualifying clients by eye. But what he didn't know was that the woman he laughed about was rewriting the very rules he had just bragged about. 10:17 a.m. The hum of an engine outside broke the usual rhythm. One by one, the staff's eyes were drawn toward the towering glass wall. Something was approaching, but this wasn't just any car. A Rolls Royce Phantom Extended, painted in a rare midnight blue with silver-grey undertones, glided slowly into the front drive. Sunlight brushed against the curves of the car, casting soft gradients across the body like shifting silk. The vehicle didn't just roll in. It arrived as if the pavement itself had quietly moved out of the way. Everything stopped. The phones, the small talk, the motion of cleaning cloths. The entire showroom held its breath. Jason instinctively adjusted his tie and stepped briskly toward the entrance. In his world, a Rolls Royce Phantom meant one thing: a client worth 9 figures minimum. This was the kind of moment he lived for. A chauffeur in a tailored black uniform stepped out from the driver's seat. He walked gracefully to the rear door and opened it with a smooth, practiced motion, as if unveiling something sacred. And from inside, a man stepped out. Gabriel Ward. No introduction needed. His presence said enough: grey suit, flawlessly tailored, a watch with no logo, but value that spoke volumes to those who knew. Eyes cool and still, like a lake at dawn, not angry, just clear. Jason rushed forward, smile wide and polished like showroom glass. "Good morning, sir. Jason Connors, sales director here at Monarch Auto." It's an absolute honor to have you with us today. Gabriel extended a hand, a firm, courteous shake. His eyes flicked over Jason like reading a resume line by line. I'm here to inquire about a specific vehicle, the Azure Phoenix in midnight blue. Jason lit up. Of course, an excellent choice. Jason beamed. The car is on display in the center of the showroom. If you'd like, I'd be happy to personally give you a full tour. Gabriel cut in, not loudly, but with a voice that didn't need volume to command silence. I know where it is. My wife came to see it yesterday, but she wasn't welcomed quite the same way. The air changed instantly. Jason froze. It felt like someone had slammed a door right into the center of his chest. Your wife?" he stammered. "Elena Ward," Gabriel replied, his gaze steady, unflinching. "She wore a white t-shirt, jeans, sneakers, and she was told to try the used car lot across town." Jason's face lost all color. Inside the showroom, a small crowd of employees had begun to gather near the glass. A few customers turned their heads. The whole space was slowly drawn toward the gravity of this conversation. I'm sure there was some misunderstanding." Jason began grasping for air. We welcome everyone. I don't recall." "You remember," Gabriel said. His voice was no longer cold, it was steel. "You didn't just dismiss her, you laughed in her face. You don't have to remember her features. Just remember the way you looked at a human being and judged her solely by what she wore." At that moment, Liam, the young employee from the day before, stepped forward. No one had called him, but his voice carried, quiet and honest. "She was the kindest guest I've ever served. I saw everything, and I'm sorry. I should have done more." Gabriel gave a small nod, not as thanks but as acknowledgement, of courage, of conscience. Then he turned back to Jason. "I'm not here to cause a scene. I came to see if this dealership was still worthy of a contract my wife was prepared to sign for a fleet purchase worth several $1 million. Jason collapsed inward, right there, beneath the blinding lights and polished marble. His arrogance from the day before was stripped bare. I truly apologize. This doesn't reflect who we are as a company," he stammered, scrambling. Gabriel slowly looked around, his gaze touching every employee, every onlooker, before he spoke again. "Maybe the problem isn't just one person," Gabriel said calmly. "Maybe it's a culture where a t-shirt is enough to make people forget basic decency." He turned and walked into the showroom, leaving Jason behind, a man who now stood like a cracked wax figure, his authority splintered by the truth. Gabriel moved slowly across the main hall of Monarch Auto Gallery, each step deliberate, as if tracing the same quiet path his wife had taken the day before when she left, unheard and unseen. The staff instinctively parted to either side. No one spoke. No one dared. He stopped exactly in front of the display platform, where the Azure Phoenix coupe, deep blue, impossibly sleek, rotated under the spotlight, glistening like a gemstone under glass. He didn't touch it, didn't lean in. He just stood still, then slowly turned to face the room. "Yesterday, my wife came here, not asking for a favor. She came to buy this car, a gift for her sister, who just finished 3 years of fighting cancer." His voice never rose. But instead of being heard, she was judged. The room held its breath. Jason stood nearby, back straight, but his eyes no longer dared meet Gabriel's. Gabriel didn't need to say his name. Everyone knew who he was talking about. She wasn't turned away because she lacked money. She was turned away because she had too much simplicity. And in this world, Sometimes simplicity is treated like it doesn't belong. A few customers quietly set their coffee cups back on the counter. One older female employee clasped her hands in front of her chest, her eyes beginning to shine with tears. Gabriel continued, his tone steady, never accusing, just painfully honest. I don't blame those who made a mistake in judgment. We all have biases. What I fear most is when no one speaks up. He turned his gaze to Liam. The young man flinched slightly, then stepped forward uncertain. But before he could speak, Gabriel nodded. You spoke, even if it was only one sentence. Even if your voice shook, sometimes that's all it takes, one small act to interrupt the entire machinery of injustice. Jason drew in a shaky breath. He took one tentative step forward. His voice cracked, barely holding together. I'm sorry, Mr. Ward, and to Eleanor, Jason said, voice trembling. I won't make excuses, but if there's any way I can make this right, you don't need to make it right for me. A voice echoed from the entrance. Everyone turned. Eleanor stood there, dressed in a soft linen dress the color of morning skies, her hair tied high, her posture calm, her gaze bright and steady, not angry, not bitter, just present. She walked slowly into the showroom, the same space where she had once been silently dismissed. But today, every step she took was a statement. I don't need an apology just because you now know I have money, she said clearly. What I hope for is that the next time a young girl in a worn-out shirt walks in to ask about a car, she isn't made to feel like she's wandered into the wrong world. She turned to Liam, offering a warm, genuine smile. Thank you for not looking at my shoes before listening to my voice. Liam blushed, his lips pressing into a thin line, too stunned to speak but grateful. The rest of the showroom stayed silent, not from confusion, not from resistance, but from the weight of realization. Gabriel turned back toward the room. I was planning to purchase an entire fleet for our corporation from this dealership, he said, voice steady. But after yesterday, I had to ask myself, should money go to a place where people are sorted by how they look? The air felt heavier now. No one moved. No one breathed. He looked at Jason, not with fury, but with something quieter, a test, a chance. But I also believe people can change, Gabriel said. And I don't believe in tearing people down. I believe in educating them. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a simple card. Next month, Ward Hope is hosting a charity gala to support a sports center for children with disabilities. We need volunteers to serve food, guide guests, push wheelchairs, and play games with the kids. He held out the card. If you really want to do something that matters, this is your chance. Jason didn't respond right away. But for the first time that morning, he wasn't looking at the floor. He met Gabriel's eyes and slowly nodded. I'll be there. Gabriel gave a faint smile, not as a guest, but as staff. Jason nodded again, firmer this time. I understand. And just like that, a door opened. Not the door of a Rolls Royce Phantom, but something far more important, the door inside someone who once believed they had the right to decide who was worthy. And that, more than any contract, more than any money, was the real gift Elena brought that day. A week later, at the Hope Bridge Rehabilitation Center, Jason Connors arrived not in a suit, not in a luxury car, and not with a title. He wore a plain blue volunteer t-shirt. A small badge pinned to his chest read, Volunteer, Jason. There was no business card, no polished speech, no confident stride expecting the world to part for him. He walked through the lobby with empty hands and, for the first time, eyes that lowered not in shame, but in humility to truly see a different world. A world not built on image, but on care, bandages, and the kind of love that doesn't ask what shoes you're wearing. That morning, Jason was assigned to mop the gymnasium floor. No one recognized him as the manager of one of the region's most prestigious luxury car showrooms. No one asked how many million-dollar deals he'd closed. No one cared. Only a boy named Trevor, sitting in a wheelchair, looked up and asked, "Are you the new janitor? You're really fast. Do you know how to play basketball?" Jason chuckled a real laugh, the first in what felt like ages. "Not very well," he said. "But I'm learning. I'll teach you then." Trevor grinned. "I only use one hand, but I still score." Jason crouched down, eyes meeting the boy's, and in that moment, he whispered silently to himself, "This is the lesson I've missed my whole life." That afternoon, he helped push a young girl in a wheelchair toward the motion sensor playground. As she held his hand and whispered, "Thanks for not minding the smell of sanitizer," Jason turned away. His eyes filled quietly, suddenly with a kind of emotion he hadn't known how to name until now. Sometimes it takes losing your title to truly earn your humanity. Sometimes it takes being mistaken for the janitor to finally learn what it means to serve. And sometimes the real luxury is being seen without needing to prove a thing. If this story moved you, share it. Not for views, but because someone out there wearing a plain shirt, walking into the wrong room, sitting in silence needs to know they belong. "No. Thank you," Jason whispered, "for letting me do something kind." That night, as he stood at the exit of the center, he caught sight of Eleanor, speaking softly with a doctor in the hallway. She turned. Their eyes met. No speeches, no dramatic music. Jason simply bowed his head deeply, sincerely. "I came here because I was told to, but I think I'll stay because I've finally learned how to be human." Elena smiled, not a smile of forgiveness, but one reserved for someone who had just crossed over to the other side of arrogance. Across town, the grand ballroom of the Harbor Light Hotel glowed with the soft shimmer of hundreds of crystal chandeliers, casting reflections across polished wood floors. But under that dazzling light, what truly shone were the faces. The faces of those who had once been overlooked, dismissed, wounded by life or by judgment, but still standing, still here. Some had survived illness. Some had lost loved ones. Some had simply survived being unseen in a world that sees only the surface. Tonight, they were not invisible. Because sometimes, the greatest transformation doesn't come from changing how we dress, but changing how we see. If this story touched something in you, share it. Let it reach someone who needs to know that dignity doesn't come with a price tag. It comes with compassion. In the left wing of the grand hall, Jason Connors was kneeling, adjusting the strap on a little boy's navy blue vest. The boy sat in a wheelchair, grinning, suit sleeves slightly too long. Jason wasn't wearing a suit. He wasn't sales director Jason anymore. He was simply a man with a name tag that read Logistics Support, J. Connors. It had been 1 month since he first stepped into the rehabilitation center, and with each passing day, another layer of his old self had quietly fallen away. "Do you remember my name?" the boy asked, eyes twinkling. Jason laughed. "Thomas, 6-year-old basketball star who plays better than I do." "Wrong," Thomas beamed. "I'm 7 now. It's my birthday today." Jason paused, caught off guard, then leaned in, lowering his voice into a playful whisper. "Well then, tonight, you get a rematch, but no promises. I'll let you win." Thomas burst out laughing, a bright, unfiltered sound that bounced off the marble walls like sunlight. And for a moment, Jason forgot all about sales reports, quarterly goals, and everything he once called a life. In that laughter, he found something else, something better. In the distance, Eleanor Ward appeared, her hand resting gently on the shoulder of a deaf girl, guiding her as they signed back and forth with quiet grace. She wore a simple navy blue dress, no necklace, no lipstick, but she radiated a kind of beauty Jason had once been too blind to see, the kind of beauty that makes people around her feel safe. As she approached, she smiled at Jason. "Thomas told me you lost a basketball game today." Jason scratched his head, sheepishly. "He faked me out, acted like he didn't know how to dribble, then dropped 3 shots in a row." Eleanor laughed, and this time, the sound didn't carry any distance between them. It was light, real, close. She looked at him long and searching, then said softly, "You seem different." Jason nodded. "I think I am. But not because I came here to make up for what I did. I came here and realized." He paused, then added, "I'd been living in a luxury bubble so thick, I forgot how to see people." Jason paused, then spoke slowly, almost as if confessing to the version of himself that no longer existed. "I used to think a worn-out t-shirt meant someone couldn't afford anything. Now, I think it might belong to someone spending everything they have to keep hope alive for someone else." Eleanor gave a small nod. Her eyes shimmered slightly, not from emotion, but from a quiet confirmation of something she had always believed: people can change. "Thank you," she said, not for apologizing, but for doing something about it. Just then, Gabriel arrived, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. He passed one to Eleanor, then looked at Jason and gave a small nod. "I hear you're training a new volunteer." Jason chuckled. "Liam. He's learning how to push a wheelchair without dropping any of the kids' teddy bears." Gabriel smiled. And then came a quiet moment between the 3 of them, not awkward, not forced, just warm. No longer the wounded and the one who caused pain. Just 3 people standing together, each doing their part to heal a society full of invisible cracks. Because redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about showing up differently. In the present, in the far corner of the ballroom, the band began to play the soft instrumental theme of the evening. A young boy tapped the side of his wheelchair in rhythm, while a little girl stepped onto the stage, ready to perform a piano solo with the only hand she had left. And Jason, the man who once valued luxury cars more than people, stood there, not at the center of the room, not near the spotlight, not shaking hands with donors or seated at the front table, but quietly. Something inside him had just clicked back into place when the last note of the piano faded. The room erupted into applause. The girl with one hand beamed as the curtain drew gently closed. Behind that curtain, Jason stood alone, hands clasped, eyes lowered, not out of shame, but out of reverence. He didn't need to be seen, didn't crave recognition. He had found value in the spaces he once overlooked, in the silence, the sidelines, the places he used to call invisible. As the evening wound down, Eleanor found him there backstage, where the lights were softer, but the truth shone even brighter. "I know I treated you poorly," Jason said, eyes still on the stage, "and even though I apologized, it still doesn't feel like enough." Eleanor didn't respond right away. She stepped closer, standing beside him, her eyes following the children laughing near the edge of the chairs, their joy unfiltered, their world still whole. Then she spoke, softly, clearly. "Jason," she said, "I don't need you to feel bad forever. I just need you to remember what it felt like the first time someone looked at you, but didn't see you, and to make sure You never make anyone else feel that way again." Jason nodded. His eyes were red, his throat thick with unspoken things. "I'm starting to understand now that respect shouldn't be something people have to earn. It should be given like breath, like sunlight." Eleanor smiled a gentle smile, not one of judgment, and not of forgiveness handed down from above. Just a simple truth spoken without words. He understood. Across the ballroom, Gabriel was speaking with a representative from an education non-profit. He glanced over at them, then gave a small nod as if closing the final chapter of a story he believed had been worth writing. Jason followed his gaze, then turned back to Elena. "Do you think Gabriel still wants to buy that fleet for the company?" Elena chuckled. "I don't know, but if he does, I imagine he'll let Liam handle it. After all, he has a better eye for people than you used to." Jason laughed, a real, easy laugh that came from somewhere lighter now. "I'm learning from him every day." As the gala came to a close, guests began to drift out, carrying with them the soft echo of laughter, the trace of a tear, and the rare comfort of having truly been seen. Jason stood by the exit, helping a young mother fold up her daughter's wheelchair. And in that moment, he wasn't thinking about sales targets or KPIs or reputation. He was thinking about one thing only. What can I do for the person in front of me right now, in the distance? Elena and Gabriel walked hand in hand, their steps slow beneath the warm string lights lining the path to the parking lot. No one stopped them. No one rushed over for a photo or a signature. No one knew they were a couple worth hundreds of millions, and they preferred it that way, because what they left behind that night wasn't in their bank accounts, it was in people's hearts. Jason watched them fade into the evening, then turned to face the nearly empty ballroom. He stood still, not to savor the moment, but to carry it with him. He remembered something a child had whispered to him earlier that day. "Mr. Jason, I like you, because you don't look at me like I'm disabled. You look at me like I'm just a regular kid." And Jason had smiled, bent down to meet the boy's eyes, and said, "That's because you are. Because you are just a regular kid," Jason had said, and I had to relearn that truth. That night, as he closed the final door of the grand hall, Jason realized he was no longer the man he used to be. He hadn't just learned how to serve, he had learned how to be human. We often measure the value of our lives by what we achieve, the titles, the wealth, the recognition, but maybe the real value lies in how we treat those who have nothing to offer us in return. Because somewhere in the eyes of a child, in the frail hands of a single mother, or in the simple clothes of a woman walking into a showroom, there might be an entire world you've never stopped to truly see. If this story touched you, share it. Not for more views, but for one more person to understand that respect should never come with conditions, and kindness never needs proof.